Hey, good morning. I hope you are well. Hope you got through yesterday all right. It's interesting that time, for me at least, seems to be going really quickly. I was afraid that without my usual routine and my usually ripping around from one school to the other and driving back and forth and doing this and doing that, the time would seem to drag. But I seem to be finding that the days are going really quite quickly. Like yesterday, it was all of a sudden, it was, oh my heavens, it's 3 o'clock. Where did the day go? So keeping busy, keeping doing stuff that is interesting for us is helpful. And we've talked about that a few times. So find stuff you like to do, get engaged in it, and do it, and things will go fairly quickly. Yesterday, we did the first half of a presentation that I've done a few times called Signs and Symptoms, and we looked at the substance use pieces yesterday. So today we're going to take a look at the mental health, mostly depression, anxiety stuff today. So I just have to do this usual fiddling around and screen sharing business. And from current slide, there we go. And guess what I'm going to start with? Check your thinking. Again, like just about everything, how we think about stuff really impacts how we feel about it. And so if you have concerns about how you're feeling, it's really important that you pay attention to how you think. And certainly not everything about depression and anxiety is based in thinking. But absolutely, how we think and how we approach things is really critical for getting better. So those first two things, is what you're thinking true? Is it really true? And the third one, how are you feeling or acting because of how you're thinking, are really critical in helping us to move from where we are. When we are feeling anxious or depressed, much of that is about how we are thinking about things. And certainly there's a chemical component to this as well. And lots of people are on anti-anxiety and antidepressive medications, which are not a bad thing at all, but they don't totally solve the problem. What they do is give you a little more resource, a little more resilience to be able to work on the problem yourself. They typically aren't magic bullets. And so the fourth question, how would you feel or act if you thought differently? If you are suffering any of the things that I'm going to talk about this morning, then using some changes in thinking, using some changes in approach are going to be helpful for you. So let's get going here. So anxiety and depression certainly can be caused by drug or alcohol use. And I've talked about that a few times. Lots of times we feel like it is the solution to our problem, but most of the time, although they may give us short periods of relief, they typically are making that underlying problem worse by really disrupting our brain chemistry. Sometimes anxiety and depression are the reason that people start using. They don't have another way of managing how they feel, and so they will start drinking more or start using something more. And that's a big risk right now, particularly because people are home without the usual things to do that they have to do, and without the usual restrictions on drinking or drugging. Like if you have a job that you used to go to every day, and it was there was a expectation that you went there sober, which most jobs have an expectation that you show up sober. You don't have that now, so it's easier to slip into a habit where you're having a few drinks or smoking some weed on a more regular basis. That can start to affect you. And anxiety and depression are really a big factor in how we are dealing with things, how we're thinking about things. So I'm going to go through some signs of depression. And this is interesting because most people think about depression as just, I can't get out of bed, or I'm feeling like harming myself. And depression is much bigger than that. There's a much wider array of signs and symptoms. So one of them is constant pessimism, feeling hopeless. And that really ties into negative thinking. If you're thinking negatively about stuff all the time, that's going to activate your stress mechanism, and that's going to reduce your brain's capacity to problem solve. And you're going to feel down. It disrupts your brain chemistry. If you're restless and crabby a lot, if you're irritable a lot, if you or get annoyed about just about everything, again, that can be a sign of an active depression that's happening to you. And again, it's really important to kind of look at how you're thinking through things. Why are you choosing that reaction? Because the way we react to things, for the most part, is a choice. And it's something that we've learned to do. It's something that we have uh, acquired a pattern for. And if you want to change something, uh, uh, you have to start looking at your thinking. The feeling like you just don't care much about life. And this is really this is the typical thing that we look at when we're thinking about depression. And so those first two symptoms, constant pessimism or restless and crabby, if you think that people are only depressed if they look like one of these two pictures that you're seeing there, then you won't recognize that you yourself may be experiencing some depression. So what I'm trying to do is sort of expand people's understanding of what that's all about. So overeating or loss of appetite is another indicator that perhaps you're dealing with uh, some internal depression. And again, right now, when everything has changed, either of those things is a risk for people. If that's your reaction to uh, feeling off, is either you eat a lot or you're worried about gaining weight, for example, and so you're extra cautious about not eating. That also can be a sign that you're depressed, that your thinking isn't quite where it should be, that your brain's not quite working properly. And of course, the suicide or self-harm issue is the one that we generally pay attention to. And these are definitely serious. If anybody that you know is talking about hurting themselves or harming themselves, or you're starting to hear them say things like, I wish I wasn't here, that's a serious issue. And that's something that needs to get addressed. And I know this is really hard for some people, and especially in the adolescent world, when one friend says to another friend, "Oh, I think I'm feeling suicidal. I might be hurting myself, or I might want to hurt myself." There's a there's a huge pressure not to tell anybody, and often those conversations start with, "Promise you won't tell anybody, but this is what I'm thinking." And that's one of the times where you need to be a bigger and better friend and absolutely tell somebody. Either tell your parents, or if you know that person's parents, please tell them. If you don't, and something does happen to that person, that's a huge weight for you to carry. And so, if you certainly talk to that person and help them understand that, that they have value and that they are cared about and they are important, but don't try and take that on yourself. Most people aren't professionals. Most people need to engage some help with those kinds of things. So again, if somebody's talking about that kind of stuff, usually they will need more help than you are able to give them. So don't try and carry that yourself, please. Uh, Another really common sign of depression are physical symptoms, aches, pains, headaches, stomach aches that don't seem to have a reason. And lots of people their depression doesn't manifest in mood, it manifests in physical feeling. And if you're feeling something like any of those things all the time, again, that's a sign that something's not okay with you. And, you know, if you've been to the doctor and they can't find anything the matter, then then there's an emotional connection to that. And so starting to practice some better self-care stuff, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes here, becomes really important. So here's a little video that I really like. So again, and like I said, I really like that little video. It uh, gives us a really good look at how people tend to internalize what's going on with them, and really addresses that idea of stigma. And we still, well, it doesn't matter how much we seem to talk about this stuff or try to educate people, having a mental health problem like depression or anxiety or having a substance problem does not mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're that there's anything less about you. Uh, it's not much different than having a broken arm. You need some help for it. We tend to not try and fix those things ourselves. But if we have a mental health issue, we get afraid to talk about it. And so think about that. Monday night, we're doing on our recovery hour show, we've got two guests coming and we're going to talk about stigma. And stigma about mental health and substance problems is really a big issue. So of course, there's apps for all of this stuff. If you do an app store search or a Google search for an app that will help with depression, there's lots and lots of things there. And because depression is individual, finding something that works for you is really important. And there's lots and lots of options out there. Anxiety is that feeling. I don't know why this does that. There we go. A sense of dread, choking, rapid heartbeat, shaky, feeling faint, wobbly legs, uh, can't breathe, and our mind just starts racing. And interestingly, most depression issues are about thinking in the past. Most anxiety issues are about thinking into the future. And so, again, if we can start to pay attention to how we're thinking about stuff, that can start to really give us an advantage of understanding that we have the power to change how we feel. We aren't a victim of these issues. And of course, there's lots of anxiety apps too. Anxiety BC has developed one particularly good for teenagers, but there's lots out there. So again, if you recognize that this is an issue, check out some resources for you. Right now, you've got lots of time to do that. And for the most part, they're free. And so some things that can help, like asking for help is huge. I get like multiple text, Facebook Messenger things, uh, website requests every day for people looking for help. Like, don't be afraid to ask and don't be afraid to talk to a professional. And when you're home now, if you've got a job or had a job, you probably have access to an EFAP program. If you're a student, you've got access to your teachers. I know all the school counselors have made themselves available. So if you're struggling with something, like ask some help. Like check your thinking, check your self-talk. We probably give ourselves an internal message 1,000 times a day about how we are. And so direct your thinking. Like be your own best friend. Don't use language that you wouldn't use with somebody else on yourself. Like don't be telling yourself that you're not good enough or that you're to this or to that, or really check those negative thinking patterns. Dr. Daniel Amen talks about ants, automatic negative thoughts, and paying attention to those is something that's really useful. Take care of your body, eat well, sleep well, exercise, uh, make sure that you've got some time for yourself, and that's really important. And time for yourself means that you're not paying attention to your phone and you're not interacting with other people. It might just be taking your dog for a walk or taking your neighbor's dog for a walk or just going for a walk by yourself and just letting your mind relax and start to figure out what it needs to do, because it has huge capacity to do that. And pay attention to what's good. Uh, one of the first shows we did when I started this after we all got kind of sent home was that young woman talking about once an hour she'd write down something good, and she's still doing that, and that still is working for her. So pay attention to it because it's always there, and practice. Figure out a plan and practice it. We have to build this stuff back into ourselves. So practice, 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 practice. And practice isn't the thing you do once you're good, it's the thing that you do that makes you good. And so if you're trying to create a new pattern for yourself, figure out what that is and then practice it. And so those questions again, check your thinking. Is what you're thinking true? If you're telling yourself that you're not good enough or you're to this or you're to that, number one, it's not true. And number two, it's not helpful. If that's going to make you feel not okay. And if you start to change that thinking, tell yourself that you have enough time, that you have enough confidence, that you have enough love, that you have enough attention. Those kinds of thoughts will start to change things for you. So again, have a good day. I will be back tomorrow, and check this stuff out. Do some research on apps that might be helpful for you. So I got to stop this share, and I will say goodbye for the day, and take care. We'll see you tomorrow.